Hi all, I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you this morning about our experience of waiting. For some of us, the past couple of months have felt a little bit like waiting. Whether it's been waiting to see our friends again, to go back to church again, to be told by the government that it's safe to go out again, or whether it's simply been the case that we've been waiting with bated breath to see how this whole thing turns out. One way or another, we've all been waiting. Of course, I know that some of us have a lot more patience than others, but I think that it's fair to say that in general, the experience of waiting, the experience of being dependent upon something or someone that is entirely out of our control, is an experience that we generally find uncomfortable and frustrating. We live in a culture and a society where being passive and being dependent is sometimes seen as a sign of weakness, and where being active and independent is more often than not seen as a sign of strength. Just think about how ingrained this is within our society. We very casually talk about keeping busy as though it is in itself a sign that everything is well and that we are generally happy. But over the past couple of months, for some of us at least, keeping busy has been an increasingly difficult thing to do. A writer who I spent some time thinking and writing about in my first couple of months of training, a theologian called William Vanstone, points to our obsession of activity and independence and says that our culture has taken this so far that we have even begun to attach our own sense of dignity and self-worth to the experience of activity and independence. It's almost like our culture says that to be dignified and to be a respectable person, you must be doing things, providing for yourself. You need to be in control of your own little world around you. And of course, regardless of whether lockdown has meant that our diaries have gotten more empty or more full, it's fair to say that for all of us, we have lost control of the world around us. Or at least we've lost the illusion that we thought we might have of control of the world around us. And I think this has left many of us feeling powerless and lost. In our culture, which attaches dignity and worth to independence and activity, our empty diaries and our dependence upon the advice given in government updates has threatened to leave many of us feeling stripped of some of our dignity and self-worth. But, as William Vanstone points out, when we look at Christ, this obsession with independence and activity should be stripped away. Vanstone contrasts the activity and busyness of Jesus' life and ministry, where he was always on the move, teaching, doing miracles, clashing with Pharisees and controlling much of what was going on around him. He contrasts this with the utter dependence of Jesus' passion. From the moment when Jesus was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus' activity and independence was entirely stripped away. From that moment, Jesus became entirely passive, entirely dependent, waiting upon the actions and decisions of others. And of course, we know that ultimately led to his death on the cross. But Jesus' death on the cross wasn't some misfortune. Jesus' death on the cross wasn't an uncomfortable footnote at the end of Jesus' remarkable life and ministry. No, Jesus' death on the cross was in fact the most supreme expression of God's goodness and kindness and love. Jesus' death on the cross was most certainly painful and humiliating, but within that pain, within that humiliation, came the sweetest revelation of God that we have ever seen. Jesus' death on the cross, where he was entirely passive and entirely dependent, speaks far more loudly of the majesty of God's heart than anything he ever did or said in his entire life and his busyness and activity. God's sweetest and most supreme revelation of himself didn't come in a time of triumph, activity and independence. No, it came in a time when he made himself entirely subject to the actions and decisions of others. You know, the centurion who saw Jesus on the cross famously said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." You know, he had only ever seen Jesus as a powerless, undignified victim who was totally out of control of what was happening to him, but he still saw God in him. I wonder what this has to say about our experience of dependence and waiting over the past couple of months, and maybe even in the couple of months to come. I think at very least it should cause us to reject our society's conclusion that value and dignity can only be found in times of activity and independence. Christ's surrender of control held the power to reveal the glory of God at its deepest level. Could our experience of surrender, of waiting, of dependence do the same? Are we looking for God in our waiting and our dependence? Do we truly believe that God can redeem this experience for the sake of his glory? Or are we simply casting these 5 months aside, writing them off as valueless, raging against the discomfort and frustration that we have felt as we've been forced to sit, to wait, to depend?